Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the UKHK seminar on getting a job in tech and data. This is part of our Skills to Work series, and we're just waiting for everyone to be able to connect in with the seminar on Zoom, and so we'll be starting in a few moments. It's really good to see you here today. Thank you so much for coming and making the time to come. We're really grateful to have you with us, and it's a real privilege to spend this time with you as well. My name is Emily. I'm part of the UKHK team here in the UK, and part of all the different things that UKHK is putting on over the next few months to make sure that people from Hong Kong feel welcome in the UK as you arrive. So some of you we have got to know personally, and some of you we are yet to meet, and we're really looking forward to do that through our network around the UK of people and communities that are connecting with you as well. We have lots of different activities and events going on over the next few months, and lots of things being planned. Some of these might be happening in a location near you as well. We're planning friendship festivals over the next few months, festivals to say welcome as you've arrived in the UK and help you to get to know new people and local people in the UK as well. So do check out our website, ukhk.org, which will give you more information about that as the dates are being finalised and confirmed around the country. Some of those locations are going to include Bristol and Manchester and London, and there's some others yet to be confirmed as well. So please keep an eye out on that and see whether there's a location near you holding a friendship festival that you would be very welcome to come to, either by yourself or with your families, to get to know local people there too. So this seminar is part of a series of seminars all about skills to work, different seminars focusing on different aspects of that. And this one is going to be focusing on tech and data. And we have some real experts with us today who are going to be able to share more about getting a job in tech and data. So I'm just going to ask the people who are part of the seminar today to join me on the screen. And we'll have a brief introduction to them, just so you know who will be sharing today and what the day is going to look like. So Rohan, would you like to introduce yourself and let us know a bit about you?
Sure. Thank you, Emily. Hello, everyone. Ni hao. That's the limit of my Chinese, unfortunately. Like Emily said, I am Rohan Kharat. I work as a business development manager for a company called Crossword Cybersecurity. Really excited to be a part of this webinar and want to do all I can in my stride to help in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan. And we're also joined by Jana. Hi, Jana.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here with you. My name is Jana. I'm based in London here, and I have spent the last 10 years working in talent acquisition. I spent a good chunk of that time at Amazon, and I've just started a new role at LinkedIn at the start of this year. And I am originally from the States in Seattle. Haven't quite picked up that British accent yet, but I have spent the last 6 years here in the UK.
Great, thanks, Jana. Great to have you with us. And Phil. Hi, Phil.
Hi everyone. I'm Phil. I'm a senior tech recruiter for the London office of a company called DAZN. We are one of the fastest growing video streaming companies in the world. We operate a Netflix type subscription based model, stream a load of different types of sports in different countries, and really excited to come and help out with this initiative.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you here. And Hugh.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, great to be here. My name's Hugh. I am also based in London. I started a company called Naya a year ago, which is essentially a jobs platform, and I'll share a bit more about that later on. But really excited to be here.
And Alexia, are you okay, Alexia?
Yeah, I was having a bit of audio problems just a while ago, but I hope everybody.
So I'm Alexia. I'm part of the fintech recruitment team from Booking.com, and I used to also recruit for Hong Kong markets when I was in agency in Singapore. So pretty excited about this whole panel.
Great, really good to have you here today. So for those of you who are joining today, you can ask any questions that you have in the Q&A function on the side of your sidebar of your screen. So those questions will come through to our speakers and we will be able to answer them. You can also ask your questions in Chinese. We are able to translate them behind the screen and pass those on to the speakers. So if you find it easier to write in Chinese rather than English, please feel free to do that, and we'd be happy to translate that for you. The session will be spoken in English today, but we will do our best to speak clearly so that you can understand. As we know, many of you, English is a second language, so well done for following us and being part of this today as well. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Hugh now from Naya, who's going to give us a bit of an explanation about what he does within his role. Over to Hugh.
Thanks so much, Emily. And I'm just going to quickly share my screen as I do this. Just bear with me one sec. Got too many windows open, always the way with these things. Cool. There we go. Hope everyone can see that. I take no responsibility for the translation on this slide. So apologies if there are mistakes, then yeah, I'll have to defer to others. But thanks so much for having me today, Emily and the team at UKHK. It's a real honor to be here. Partly, I mean, I first came across Krish about 10 or 11 years ago when he was speaking at an event, and have kind of followed his work from a distance for a long time, and the work that he's done in the inclusion space is massive, and there's a small part to which he's played in Naya even existing. So it's great to be here today and with this amazing panel who I'm sure will have a lot more interesting and wise things to say than I will. So I will try and keep my part as short as possible. So I run a company called Naya. Naya is a talent inclusion platform in the tech industry. We are essentially a marketplace that gives underserved or hidden talent access to jobs in tech. So we partner with lots of different organizations like UKHK and their communities to onboard people onto the platform, where they are then published and can engage with employers all over the world. To join, all you have to do is go to naya.ai. You can create a profile there. We then publish your profile once it's ready, and once it's published, employers can see you and engage with you and chat with you through the platform. We also have a lot of partners who provide training and workshops, kind of like today's workshop, but lots of training opportunities, most of which are remote as well. So as soon as you've created your profile, you'll get notifications when those arise. Those are all fully funded. So there's absolutely no cost to joining. There's nothing that users pay at any point through the process, completely free all the way through. And hopefully if people are on this call and looking for work, I encourage you to onboard today. We can help set up your profile and hopefully connect you with some employers in the UK so that you can kind of further your career. So that's a bit about Naya. Emily, I'll stop it there so I don't take up too much time and hand back to you.
Thank you, Hugh. That's a really good introduction and really helpful to hear what you're doing at Naya as well. So now we're going to go to Jana from LinkedIn, who's going to talk a little bit more about talent acquisition at LinkedIn. So over to you, Jana.
Can I just check that people can see my slides there?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Always worth checking. All right. I'm Jana. I just wanted to introduce myself and go through the agenda for what I'll be sharing over the next 10 minutes here. So let's see if we can, there we go. So just a little bit about me, my career. I started out in recruitment at Tata Consultancy Services in Budapest, Hungary. From there, I moved to Amazon, where I worked in Seattle as a campus recruiter, and then moved to London as a recruitment manager, still focused on the campus space. And then a number of roles over kind of my 8-year time at Amazon. And then, like I said, recently just started at LinkedIn at the start of this year. So different experiences, different companies, always in talent acquisition. My focus for this session will just to give you 5 essential tips for landing your next role. Hopefully they can be applicable to whatever type of job you're looking for. I know this is tech and data focused, but this should be relevant to you for sure. But also if you're looking for something in a different field as well, it should still be relevant. So what we'll go through is identifying your top skills as the first kind of step when approaching your job search, building your personal elevator pitch, targeting your job search, preparing for the interview, and then maintaining a growth mindset. So focusing on how you're approaching it from a, I guess, mental and resilience standpoint as well. So the first step is to identify your top skills. So many people jump straight into the job search without actually thinking about what they do super well. So I've just thrown out some questions here to get you thinking about what's unique to you. What are you exceptionally good at? What is something that only you can do? What do you enjoy? What are you passionate about? What are you learning in your free time right now? All of these things are really unique to you, and they're going to help you stand out and differentiate yourself from other candidates. Another thing to note is that when we talk about things that we enjoy and that we're passionate about, we tend to come across more confident and competent. So by identifying the things that you know you're good at, you're going to come out and stand out just by generically being passionate and communicating in that way. So I would say, start by, again, identifying your top skills. Don't get too worried about the questions here. These are just to get you starting thinking about how you can differentiate yourself. So again, these are just questions to get you thinking. You can use other sets of questions that spark your curiosity about thinking about your personal skills. Once you identify your skills, you're going to use that to build your personal elevator pitch. So this is a couple of sentences that you can put on your CV, you can put on your LinkedIn profile, you can say to an employer in your first initial interview that really summarizes who you are so that the employer can get an understanding of you as a candidate. So I've just wrote down mine. Hi, I'm Jana Berger. I'm passionate about building high-performing, diverse teams that empower the business to deliver on its vision. I have over 8 years of work experience in talent acquisition at global organizations, solving challenges around hiring at scale, developing internal talent, and enabling first-time leaders. I grew up in Seattle and I'm an avid runner, and I'm excited to learn about your role today. So this is just an example, but this should help you formulate how you can summarize your skills and your work experience very succinctly in a way that, again, positions you on what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and then is unique to you as well. So once you've thought about your personal skills and you've written your personal brand, now it's time to begin your job search. Again, don't just attack your job search without first thinking about yourself and what you bring to the market. So now you're ready. Obvious thing is to update your CV with your experience, skills, and the elevator pitch that you just did. So make sure those things are updated, included on your CV, and written down there. You might be asking, this is the world of LinkedIn, isn't it? And in a way it is, but yes, CVs are still very important. So do make sure that you still have a copy of a CV in Word or PDF format that is up to date, has your experiences on, and just summarizes your work experience as well, as most employers are still asking for CVs along with an application. Once you've done that, start identifying roles that have skills that are aligned to your strengths. This is why I think it's so important to start with your skills before you approach the job search, because you can now search jobs based on skills. So say one of your skills is data mining. So you could put that into LinkedIn and it can give you all the jobs that have that as a criteria. Now you've actually identified your top strength and matched that with the job, and your chances of success are going to be much higher just by using that approach. So that's one way to approach looking for opportunities that might be slightly different than just going off job title. Another thing you can do, and you can do this on LinkedIn and other job platforms as well, but you can follow companies that are interesting to you. This means that you'll get updates about their news, updates about new jobs, and you'll be connected with them. So you can set up job alerts for new roles. This empowers you to apply for the job quickly and be one of the first applicants when it opens, and just stay up to date on what's happening with companies that you're interested in. Next tip is to use your network. Ask for introductions, referrals, coffee chats. All the jobs that I've ever obtained were somehow through my network, through someone that I knew that opened a door. Often it is much more successful to go this route, so don't underestimate the power of just saying, hey, could I have a coffee? Let's have a conversation. It is a little bit more, I guess, it takes a little bit more initiative to do this. It doesn't come naturally. So do encourage you to step out of your comfort zone, ask for a coffee chat, and you never know what leads might come from that. Once you're having coffee chats, it's important to stay in touch. So don't just let that coffee chat be once and done. Make sure you keep in touch with people that you've met. They might not have a role now, but maybe they have your dream job in a few months later, and then they remember the coffee chat they had with you, and bam, you've got your foot in the door already. So keep in touch with your leads, follow up, ask open-ended questions. How are things going? How's it going with that project we talked about on our last coffee chat? You never know where these conversations might lead. Then when it comes to skills, make sure you also know what skills you don't have. These are called like skills gaps. So I would say identify what skills you're lacking and map out a plan to obtain those skills. That could be through courses, education, or certifications. This is more of a long-term play, but it is important to understand where your industry is going and what skills they're going to need in the future. So for example, say presentations and giving talks is something that is a skill that you feel is important in where you're applying, and it's not something you have experience in. You can map that as something you want to get more experience in. Maybe you can apply for a free course that allows you to get practice. You can put on your CV that's something you're practicing and learning. And then over time, that can be something that you add into your, let's say, skills arsenal once you've obtained that skill. LinkedIn does have a lot of offerings for upskilling. And if you go to LinkedIn, they have a learning platform where you can actually tap into some of the pre-created trainings to help you obtain new skills. Okay, so let's say you've done all of that and you've been invited to interview. How do you stand out at the interview? So these are just some of my top tips for landing the job. So first, make sure you research the employer, read about their values, their vision, mission, and culture. So many candidates pop into the interview, but they actually skip this step. They focus so much on preparing their answers, they forget to do their research about the company. This piece is so important. Talent is key to these employers achieving their vision. And so you're part of that. So you do want to be able to make sure you can communicate what it is that resonates with you about that company. I would really suggest here that you find things that are honest, find things that genuinely resonate with you. Try to choose things that are really interesting to you, not just say something generic here. This is not a tick box exercise. This is something where you can genuinely be curious and think about, why do I actually want to work with this company and not that one? Do some thinking about it and try and be a little bit creative as well here. Again, in the interview, encourage you to be transparent about the skills that you lack, but at the same time, demonstrate a willingness to learn. So what I mean by that is saying, well, actually right now, I haven't had any experience with that type of data, but what I can tell you is that in the past, I've trained myself this, and this skill, and I'm very willing to learn, and I look forward to whatever trainings you have available internally. This transparency about the skills you lack shows the employer that you're open, transparent, and honest, and also able to identify what things you're not as good at. Again, this is something that comes with time, so just make sure you do think about what skills you have, and make sure also you think about what skills you'd like to grow in, as this will help in the interview process. And finally, and I think this is the most important thing, is to maintain a growth mindset. So what is a growth mindset? So I'm just going to read here the definition, and then I'm going to tell you a story that I hope will make this land. So people with a growth mindset feel that their skills and intelligence can be improved with effort and persistence. They embrace challenges, persist through obstacles, learn from criticism, and seek out inspiration in others' successes. This is so much easier said than done, but I do want to make sure we spend some time thinking about it, because interviewing, applying for jobs, and the whole job search can be rife with failure. It can be really easy to get disheartened. How many times have we all applied to a job where we got an auto rejection and no feedback? It's demoralizing, it's hard, and it happens to everyone. I have not landed every job I've applied for. So I guess what I'm saying here is that when you approach the job search, you're going to encounter failure. That is a given. However, what you do with that failure is key. How do you embrace it? Do you see it as this is it, or do you take it as an opportunity to learn? So this is where I'm going to just tell a little story about someone who inspires me, and that's Elliot Kipchoge here. Elliot is the fastest runner over the marathon distance of all time. He ran in under 2 hours. He's the first human to ever cover the marathon distance in under 2 hours. Now, you might think, what is that? I don't know what that means, but that's 26.2 miles at 4 minutes 38 miles per mile, or 2 minutes 48 seconds per kilometers over 42 kilometers. So we're talking about some intense running. He already has the title for fastest marathoner of all time, and he's won the Olympics already. So in 2020, when he came to London to run the marathon, after the pandemic, there hadn't been that many races, and he was invited to London to run the elite race. All eyes were on Elliot. He's the fastest marathoner of all time, and no one's seen him race in a number of months. What's he gonna do? Well, he has a really tough day. He battles through a lot of pain, and he ends up 8th in his field. He has not lost a marathon in a long time. The media and everyone are criticizing, saying, maybe he's too old, maybe he should retire, maybe his time is over. Elliot even personally said it was a hard moment for him in sport because you win and you lose. So what was he going to do next? Maybe he was going to retire. He's already had the fastest marathon of all time. What more is there to do? But instead, he came and ran in Tokyo and he won. He won the marathon gold in Tokyo. And he did that back to back from winning the previous 4 years, which is very difficult to do. In doing so, he demonstrated growth mindset. He demonstrated that I've had a failure, but actually I'm going to use that to improve and to embrace. And this is one of the things that inspires me a lot about Elliot. Doing that on the grand scale with lots of criticism is very difficult. So I think for us, as we approach our job search, let's remember that it's okay sometimes to have those setbacks, but let's choose to use those setbacks as opportunities to learn and to grow. And I'm sure that's going to help us be a lot more successful as we approach landing our next role. That's all for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jana. There was some really helpful insights into as people start to think about getting jobs in tech and data. There's some really helpful tips there that will that I'm sure people will really be able to grab a hold of and think through and think what that means for them in their own journey of getting a job in tech and data. Thank you so much for all of you who have started to ask questions in the Q&A function. We are receiving those, and there's some really great questions that have come in so far. If you've had questions from what Hugh said or what Jana said, please feel free to put those in there, and they are coming through to us at the back. We're now going to have a panel from the people who we met right at the start. We're going to have a panel to discuss what it means to get a job in tech and data. So please send in your questions and they would love to discuss those and help you where you are at in getting a job in this area. So I'm going to hand over to Hugh, who is going to chair this panel. And just to get us started, Hugh, what advice might you have for those people who are thinking about getting a job in tech and data? Where could they start, and what advice might you have?
Great. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so for from my perspective, again, I'll try and keep it short because the real experts are yet to come. But one of the pieces of advice that we often give to people coming through our platform, a lot of those people are people who will have had to have relocated to find work. And I always challenge them and say, what is the one thing that you have that sets you apart from anyone else that's going into this interview? And the answer that I'm looking for is their story. It's your story. That's the thing that you have that no one else has going into an interview. So one piece of advice that I would have is around storytelling. You know, a big way interviewing for jobs and even putting yourself out there with your resume or cover letters, things like that. It's kind of marketing. It's you're selling a story, and you're hoping that the person on the other side is going to buy it. And no one has your story. You're the protagonist in that story. You're the heroes. Storytellers will talk about the hero's journey often, which is kind of all about what did you have to overcome? What monsters did you have to defeat to get where you are today? And I would really encourage people to really think about the story that they're putting across when they go into an interview. And I'll kind of give three points to that, which maybe will add some meat to it. The first is, and actually Jana touched on this, is think about your audience. So think about the interviewer, think about the company that you're interviewing for, do the research. You know, people tend to buy from people that they like. And so it's really important to know who it is that you're speaking to and telling your story to. The second thing is you only need to share what you're comfortable with when it comes to this sort of thing. So I've got I don't know if you can see it here, but I've got a little scar on my forehead here, which I had when I think from when I was like 6 years old, and I won't bore you with the story, but the scar is fine to touch because it healed a long time ago. And when we have stories and we're sharing our kind of our hero's journey, there are some things that are scars, and we can tell them and talk about them, and those are the things that shape who we are. They demonstrate resilience, the things that we've overcome. Now, other people may still have cuts that are like scabs, where there's kind of, if you pick at it, it might bleed, it might hurt. And those things that you don't have to share yet. One day that'll heal and it's a scar, and then you can share it and wear it with pride because it's part of who you are. So we always, again, encourage people only to share what they feel comfortable with in an interview or in situations like that, especially if they have been through some kind of forced relocation or things like that, where it can be quite tough. I also once was unemployed for about 3 months, and I remember at the time going into interviews trying to talk to interviewers about why I'd had time out of work, and there were certain things that I was comfortable sharing and certain things that I weren't, but there was really thinking about that journey and selling myself, and that was I think what enabled me to be set apart in the interviews that I did. And then the final thing I'd say, so we said think about what's relevant for the interviewer, only share what you're comfortable with, and then talk about your achievements and the impact they had. So what are the achievements that you've had inside and outside of work, and what is the impact? Always good to talk about the impact, again, the things that you overcame, the monsters that you defeated, and the impact that has. So that would kind of be my advice. And I'd encourage people to go away and Google the hero's journey as part of storytelling. It comes up a lot in marketing as well, as a very common tool for telling a powerful story. Cool. Well, look, let's move on to some of the other panelists, because I know we've got a deep well of wisdom with us today. And I'm going to come to Phil, because Phil, I'd love to hear from your perspective at DAZN. What advice would you have around that personal brand and how you build a personal brand in tech specifically?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess some of it follows on from what Jana was saying in terms of, first off, a big suggestion is to try and figure out what kind of tech interests you. So whether that's, for example, an area of interest, so finance, media, for example, or even technology. Find out what you enjoy doing, where you get the most energy from, and from there you can really then start building out the rest of your personal brand. So that's the first thing I would say. I mean, me personally, for example, being a huge sports fan and kind of a huge kind of media person, that's where I knew I wanted to focus myself on and my efforts on. So that's where I built my personal brand and network into. And since I started it, you know, it's some case of similar as Jana mentioned, you know, it's been connections that have got me my previous roles. It hasn't even been a lot of applying as such. So it just kind of shows how important that is. First off, moving on from that one, I would say one of the bigger things would be social media. You know, as a recruiter, I can honestly say that, you know, LinkedIn is obviously still one of our biggest platforms of finding people. Not only LinkedIn, you've got Stack Overflow, GitHub, so all these kind of developer websites where you can share your own projects, code, and that kind of stuff. And you can also contribute to other developers' open source projects. Those kind of things are really sort of useful to create accounts on and be a part of. Even Twitter and Facebook. I know it's not something maybe people would sort of consider, but it's really big as well, just to even follow the companies that you really sort of identify with and like. Those are the places that really recruiters go to find talent at the moment. So those are the big ones there. So as I mentioned, LinkedIn, super useful. Make sure you keep that up to date. Follow companies across all those platforms, add relevant connections of recruiters in that space, other tech professionals, just to widen your network. And you'll also see a lot of, you know, interesting posts, events, meetups, all those kind of things that you can join, especially in the world nowadays where a lot of things are virtual nowadays still. So it's even better. So it means you can join a lot more stuff that maybe would have been on site previously. So that's really cool. Joining professional groups, specific tech groups. There's a London JavaScript community, for example, which you can join stuff and kind of be a part of, and, you know, attend these meetups and events, meet people. That's where you're going to kind of build your brand, I guess, and kind of, you know, build your profile up. Keeping up to date with new and emerging technologies, programming languages. So for example, TypeScript seems to be pretty popular at the moment. So it's identifying that if that's kind of an area that you like, and kind of, you know, maybe looking to upskill privately on that, and doing some courses, reading some books. That's a key point there, I would say. As mentioned, I just mentioned before, virtual conferences and meetups, you know, I can't stress, like, these are, you know, a really great way to learn, meet like-minded people and network. You know, it's as a recruiter, we found and hired people who have attended these events. So believe me, you know, jobs are coming from these events. But not only that, it's just meeting people and, you know, saying hi, and then building friendships and you know, be part of the community. It's really nice as well. So I'm happy to kind of, you know, following on from this, you know, give some locations of places where to go and stuff like that. Even Twitter, you know, these places, all these social media accounts will advertise these events. So the more that you build this network up, the more events you'll come across and be able to see. This one's not for everyone. I would kind of say it's not for me personally, but some people, you know, it might be for writing blogs, you know, not have to be anything to do with work. It can be personal, you know, a journey that you're taking, something that you're doing in your personal life. I find these are just really sort of super great way to enhance your brand and kind of really interesting to people. I enjoy reading other people's. That's a really cool thing to do as well. And then if you're able to do so, depending on kind of what level you're at, what also could help is providing mentorship yourself, you know, volunteering to help coach people to maybe, you know, considered a bit less junior than yourself, graduates, you know, and going through the community that way. Those are really sort of some interesting ways, again, to kind of build your brand up. And I think those are the kind of key points for me, not wanting to take up too much of everybody's time. So I've seen some great questions that are coming through. So a lot of these, I'm sure, will get sort of expanded as we keep going.
I've seen that you've kind of answered some already in your stuff there, Phil, and I hope everyone's making notes, some real nuggets in here. And I think the point you make around networking is so critical. And actually, I wanted to jump to Alexia a bit on that, because it's such a crowded market. You know, we talked about LinkedIn and especially in tech, the online communities like Discord. Alexia, what's your advice? How do you stand out? How do you make yourself visible in such a crowded space?
Okay, so before I answer that question, I would like to share this with all of the people who are attending. So I actually have that experience of being an Asian person moving to a different market, having to move and presenting my CV and having to try and stand out, and having my headhunter reach out to me to qualify me for a role. And at the same time, I've also recruited in the Hong Kong market. So I would want to identify first, like, what are the things that we usually put in our CVs in the Hong Kong market that doesn't really apply to either the UK markets or European markets, wherever you're targeting. So one of the things is like long-winded CVs. This is such a big no-no within the tech space. Like, if you know the term TDLR, too damn long to read, that's something that exists in the market. Like, if we see that your CV is about 10 pages and literally we're looking at the last 5 years of your experience and qualifying that, they're saying, okay, this person has done a lot of work within certain space, but it's just so much to digest, then we don't read it anymore, right? So the first thing that you have to look at is simplifying the format of your profile and identifying the main points that you would want to see. So one of the things that Jana mentioned earlier was about skills and experience that you have acquired versus skills that you want to grow in. So before you look into that, you look into what would turn around a headhunter or a recruiter on identifying your CV as like somebody they'd qualify. So if you are coming from Hong Kong and you're still in Hong Kong, it would be good to highlight that maybe you don't need a visa, because sometimes the requirements internally will need a visa. If you are already in Hong Kong, put in a phone number that is, if you're already in the UK, put in a phone number that's in the UK, because that means the headhunter will be able to reach you. And at the same time, we'll be able to see like the things that would be more easier for us to put you forward for a role. Now, skills acquired versus skills you'd want to grow in. The more important bits when you're applying to a role is how relevant is the role to your profile. Let's say you are a data analyst moving into a developer role. Did you code before, or are you working on stuff that are the gaps in your CV, like technologies that you're upgrading? These are things that you can explain in your profile, that you make it more relevant to the role that you're applying for. Don't use your CV as like a one format thing. Make it relevant to every single role that you're looking into, because this is very important. Gaps in the profile as well are very important to explain. If there is a gap right now, what are you doing? You want to be able to be seen as somebody who is constantly upgrading, or like what Jan talked about, growth mindset. So if you are working on stuff on GitHub, Stack Overflow, which are like techie stuff, or you're doing like short courses to keep yourself up to date market, it definitely helps when we see that, because we're seeing that, this person may be unemployed, but this person is also running something from their end to be able to make themselves relevant to the market. Another thing that probably I do want to say is that as an internal headhunter or a recruiter versus also being an external headhunter, I've been both. We go through hundreds of CVs every day. So what we want to see is relevance to the role that you're applying for. And if you are not skilled in a certain space, we want to see what you're doing to be relevant to that space. Sometimes there is that question I saw a while ago about people wanting to be 100% match. It's not really that. We are looking at what are the possibilities for your profile versus what would be the role that we're hiring for. And we need to understand that you are going to be able to do the role. And that's how you can also utilize yourself in the interview. So visibility is the key. Definitely highlight, as I said earlier, highlight that you might not need relocation, because some companies in the market would definitely appreciate that. I know from an agency perspective, I don't want to say that this is a standard practice, but I know from agency perspective that we go through CVs like within 30 seconds and we see, okay, this profile, I know this person can make the role. So what we want to see is, of course, availability. We want to see a bit more about having less hassle to put you forward as a candidate, and then the relevance of your skill set to the role that we're hiring for. So those are things that you have to look into. Shortening your job descriptions are also very important. You don't necessarily also need to put in every single project that you've worked on, but maybe put in your achievements in terms of your role. If you've had a 5-year stint in a certain company, the best thing to do is put in all the major achievements that you've had and what you've done as a contribution for an individual contributor rather than as a team. And beyond that, also go into more detail into technologies that you've been exposed to, because we want to see that you've been exposed to certain tech. And if you haven't been exposed to certain tech, again, what are the things that you're doing on the side for you to improve yourself on that? So probably that's what I can share in terms of like, visibility in not just the UK, but the global market space. Last thing is, of course, like do some research in terms of each, let's say, geographical location you're applying to. Some areas in the world appreciate a picture. Some areas in the world don't do pictures. There are some cultural differences like that. There's also the name. This is probably the thing I almost forgot to say. I know the Chinese names will always start with the last name, and it's a bit confusing when we give you a call because we're going to say, let's say Tan He Ling or something instead of saying your first name. So we will appreciate it if you had your English name there, or at least like your first name, or at least how to pronounce your name, so that when we give you a call, it's a bit more, it's a bit more relevant, and we don't make a mistake as well, don't embarrass themselves in interview as well. Because end of the day, like we are happy to treat you very good as candidates, but we also need to be able to how to approach you, and yeah, I guess like that's all it for visibility on my end.
That's great, Alexia. Thanks so much. Quick question on UK photo. Yes photo or no photo in the UK on the CV?
No photo in UK.
Yes photo.
No photo. There we go.
No photo in UK.
Noted. So I need to update my CV then. Thanks so much. And actually, I'm going to come to Rohan in just a minute on cybersecurity. But just before we do, it was great hearing that feedback, Alexia, especially the stuff around CV and brevity and visibility. But I just wanted to quickly jump to John about LinkedIn, and in the same way, from a LinkedIn perspective rather than a CV, what are your top 3 tips for really standing out on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I'm just going to give the stat that folks with a photo receive 21x more views and 9 times more connection requests if you just add a picture. So if you're on the fence about whether to add one or not, hopefully that data does encourage you.
Picture on LinkedIn, but not on your CV.
Yes.
There you go. This is really helpful. I'm making notes as well in case I need a new job in the future.
Yeah. And then I think add the skills that we talked about in the session to LinkedIn as well, because recruiters can search based on skills. And add your summary that we talked about as well, so that you could just plug and play, copy paste from what you added to your CV. And then I think a couple of things that people don't always think to do with LinkedIn, I'm hoping to give you something that you might have not already thought about, but is comment on things that are interesting to you. Don't just like, because commenting leads to an interaction, and that interaction could maybe lead to a message or a connection and a slightly deeper interaction than just liking. And commenting can also give you a comfort level of now you're putting something out on the platform. Maybe you'll be more comfortable later to do your own post yourself. So commenting is a great way to engage with recruiters, companies, etc. And then I would say make sure you join groups as well. Groups that are things that you're interested in, and those can give you opportunities to connect with other people doing similar things. And I mentioned about following companies already, but those would be some of my additional tips as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Really helpful, and helpful to kind of really get that kind of feedback from someone who's at the coalface. Rohan, cybersecurity. Would love to hear a bit specifically about cybersecurity, because I know that ecosystem is growing massively in the UK. What kind of opportunities is that presenting for people who are looking for roles in tech?
Thanks, you. So much. I guess there's plenty going on in the world of cybersecurity. As they say, most battles these days are not being fought on the front line, but they're being fought online, even with the ongoing conflict between sort of Ukraine and Russia as well. There's so much emphasis on cybersecurity and having a strong, cybersecurity posture too. In fact, I just recently read a quote from Nikesh Arora, who's like the CEO of Palo Alto Networks, one of the biggest cybersecurity companies in the world, where he mentioned that he's not been more worried about cybersecurity in any time as compared to now. So obviously there's a massive growing concern, but also it brings a lot of opportunity. I think globally, there's a massive shortage of cybersecurity experts to the tune of over 2 million. And some of that is in the UK as well. The UK, fortunately, puts a lot of emphasis on cybersecurity. The government itself, the UK is just behind the US, so they're number 2 on the global cybersecurity index, which also shows that there is kind of huge focus on the private sector as well as the government sector when it comes to cybersecurity. The UK has a national cybersecurity strategy in which they are kind of looking to invest to the tune of 2.6 billion. And this is working with organizations like GCHQ, which kind of looks after the overall cybersecurity and just general security of the UK, MI6 and other government organizations. And what the government has realized that, you know, they can't just rely on private organizations to help them out when it comes to sort of looking after the overall ecosystem of cybersecurity within the UK. And hence, there's a lot of push and emphasis from the government. A lot of SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises as well, who kind of lag sort of slightly behind when it comes to cybersecurity, are being encouraged to really kind of focus on what is needed, because I think most CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, that is, their biggest nightmare or biggest concern right now is not if they will get hacked, but it's about when they will get hacked and how much money are they going to lose. And I think from sort of what I have seen, there is opportunity potentially for all 226 of these participants to potentially get into cybersecurity, because there's so much of appetite and scope. There are courses run by the National Cybersecurity Center Training courses, which is again a government-run organization. So those sort of free courses to upskill. There's kind of plenty going on in terms of large corporate organizations like LinkedIn, like Amazon, like Fortinet, who offer like free courses to help you like upskill and kind of get into the cybersecurity arena. There's a massive shortage when it comes to cyber risk analysts, solution engineers in cybersecurity, architects, and the likes. So I think sort of just coming back to what all the other panelists have said, I think to stand out, you just sort of need to kind of make a lot of, in fact, put yourself out there more and more when it comes to LinkedIn, when it comes to sort of networking. I also go back to some what the other panelists have said, that in terms of networking, that's really important. I have actually got most of my jobs via networking as well. And in some ways, I kind of also touch upon Alexia's point about not having, CVs that are 10 pages long and having them short and to the point, kind of really focusing on your strengths. And so same goes with cybersecurity as well. But as far as I see and kind of first-hand knowledge I get about this industry, there is tons of opportunity within the UK to sort of get into this arena, really make a difference, and there's a massive need for it as well.
Fantastic, thanks, Rohan. Such a good point about the importance of perseverance, isn't it? Especially in such a crowded space, and I know that can sometimes feel quite demoralizing at times if you're having to plug away. But I encourage people to follow Rohan on LinkedIn, because if you ever need a pick me up, Rohan's always sharing really encouraging and hopeful posts. So encourage you to follow him. Thanks, Rohan. We've got some fantastic questions coming in from the audience, so I'm going to jump to some of these now. One that was interesting that I was going to come to Phil on, someone was asking about having skills from the old world of technology, and I know that you mentioned the importance of brushing up and staying up to date. How important is that, and what are the kind of new skill sets that are really high in demand in the market at the moment?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's a tough one because, sometimes that comes with cost, etc., to do courses and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you could do your own personal stuff based around new technologies. As I mentioned, I mean, in London, personally, the JavaScript community is still sort of number one, I would say. It's still pretty huge and sort of very popular. So a modern JavaScript stack sort of based around React, Node.js, You'd also be looking at TypeScript, GraphQL. For me personally, those are kind of the kind of in technologies at the moment. So, you know, certainly doing some research and reading up on that, maybe, you know, looking into doing some personal projects, some courses. There's a load of coding classes in London, certainly, that you can look into. Happy to share some names and some links, etc. That would be what I would say.
Fantastic, thanks. And how important, Alexia, I'll come to you. How important is kind of experience versus skill sets? So I think, you know, should people invest time into long boot camps, or should they be really looking to build experience and learn on the job?
I would say that's a very tricky question. It's a good one as well. Definitely from, let's say, more senior roles in the market, you would want the experience, because the seniority level is there to assess that you are able to do the delivery in terms of the work, as well as you are able to guide more junior people within the team when you onboard. But if you are looking at, let's say career shifts or entry into the market, because you are switching from tech, like one language to another, you can utilize your skill sets via the career upgrades. Boot camps are helpful. It's also good to take on formal lessons or classes like short diploma courses to be able to engage into that. But in terms of all of the, let's say, the needs that we are looking for, sometimes you cannot expect that let's say you're a senior in your current role, you automatically qualify for something very, very senior. Because we are going to be looking at your skill set, what's the relevance, sometimes even the domain is important, right? Because there are certain practices in a certain field that will affect how you qualify a candidate. What could help for you as a candidate is always looking into like similarities of the domain, the role that you're doing, and like what you can deliver. As I said, it's good to highlight your achievements in your profile, and it helps us understand a bit more about like what you're able to deliver beyond the skill set checking, tick box checking that a lot of people do.
Right, really helpful kind of insight into the balance of experience and skill sets. And Rohan had some interesting questions come through. I presume you've done some interviewing in your time on the business side. Are there any taboos? Anything we've talked a lot about things that you should do in an interview. Are there any things that you should avoid doing in an interview?
I think just probably talking too much. You've got to kind of stick to the point, because you know, nerves do take over. As you know, in this webinar, I'm a bit nervous as well, so it's kind of natural. But so you have to make sure that you are quite close to the subject matter, and try and focus on the question. Give strong examples. That's really a key, because anyone can say a lot of different things, but most interviewers, they probably are looking for examples from your kind of past experiences, things that will really help you in doing the job that you're being interviewed for. So yeah, I think just kind of going off course is definitely a no-no from me.
Great. So brevity is as important in the interview as it is in the CV. Great. Thanks so much. Interesting question here about language proficiency. So we kind of spoke about obviously proficiency with coding languages or tech skills. Someone's asked, especially from the perspective of an IT project manager, how important is being fluent in the native language? And I'll come to Jana for that.
That's probably a better one for Alexia, who's hiring tech directly. Sorry, I'm going to pass
perfect.
that to her.
No, helpful. Great. Alexia, you've been voluntold for this one.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
So how important is the proficiency in the native language? So in the UK in English, how important is that in comparison to kind of the core skills, the tech skills?
Okay, so in technology, right? If you were a Java developer and a C# developer, the syntax is the same. It's just the language is different. It's like speaking English and French, but you are trying to say the same things. But you're just using a different mode. So you have to see the similarities in terms of that. A lot of times when it comes to, let's say, coding specific technologies that we are looking into for roles, we look at like how transferable the skill set is before we dismiss a candidate. Before you go into rejecting candidate, we look at what is the transferability. There are a lot of similarities with the syntax of different technologies like Java, Python, C#, and even like the functional programming languages like Scala. I'm going deep tech in here, but I'm for those people who are heavy into coding, you will understand that there are a lot of similarities, and you just have to know and find out like which ones are there that you can utilize for the next role that you are going after. And if you are really struggling, the boot camps and the courses that are on different platforms are very helpful to see how you can switch over to languages. And there's also like communities. Stack Overflow is number one. A lot of people learn by that. YouTube is another option. There's so many modes and medias that you can access to be able to upgrade a little bit about your existing, let's say, language proficiency to another one.
Great. And also on the topic of language, what about actual, like in being able to speak English? How important would that be in comparison to your ability to code or your technical skills?
So it is quite important to be able to at least articulate what you are trying to develop. A lot of the times, to be able to move up into the ladder, you are able to articulate system design, you're able to articulate architecture, or for projects, you are able to articulate clearly the thought process. Of course, obviously, it's also up to us as recruiters to consider that there are some people whose language is not English as their first language, right? So we have to, it's also us to, as recruiters, to practice inclusivity and diversity in terms of the recruitment process. So it will work to both ways. And of course, that's something that like we deeply advocate about. We have to understand that not everybody's first language is English.
I was going to jump in there if that's all right.
Please do.
So it's similar to what was just said, but just before Christmas, actually, a developer came over from Hong Kong to join us at the Zone in London, and she actually reached out to her yesterday just to kind of ask for her thoughts and kind of maybe a bit of advice. And it's a tricky one because not everybody has access to it, but she said trying to immerse yourself, in a English-speaking working environment before relocating really helped her personally. Obviously, it's not potentially possible for everybody to do this, but certainly maybe doing some mock interviews, practice interviews is also a good way to help when it comes to that as well. Just to add that in there.
Awesome, thanks, Phil. There's a few questions coming through as well around like the importance of specializing. Like, is it good to specialize in a specific kind of tech stack or front end or back end, or do recruiters tend to look for more generalist roles? I'll come back to you on that.
I think it varies so for us, it varies in the domain. So one of our domains might be more full stack. So you'd need experience across both sides. Some are more front end focused, some are more back end. So it kind of depends on the company, and it also kind of depends on how you want to do things. You might be more of a fan of the front end work, you might be more of a fan of the back end work, you might want to be full stack. That's kind of, comes back to deciding what you enjoy doing the most, and then kind of upskilling from there, I would say. Yeah, so I think that's sort of the main thing.
Great, thanks. And we're about to lose Jana in 1 minute, so I wanted to come to her on the question about interview feedback. How important is it to ask for feedback, and how often do people actually get genuine feedback from the interviews that they've done?
Yeah, thanks to you. I did see that one, and I think it's definitely something you can ask for as a candidate, but I will just give the experience I've had as a recruiter in that not all companies are legally able to share detail, and that's just a policy that companies may have. So just know that, yeah, you might not always be able to get it, and that could be a legal policy. It is still something I would encourage you to ask for, because every company may have a different policy. But as soon as the recruiter comes back to you with an answer, I would say just respectfully, thank them for whatever information they do give you. And again, make sure you stay in touch, right? It might not be a no, it might be a no for now, but that could be a yes in the future. So make sure to maintain those relationships in a positive way. And then the other thing I would say is so much of the hiring decision is actually not just about you as a candidate. There could be so many things happening in that business. There might be an internal candidate that just popped up and they want to make sure that internal is seen. There might be a budget constraint where they need to actually close that role and change it to something else. The hiring manager may have decided after the interviews that they want to scope that role to something completely different. So it is really easy to receive everything as personal, and that's what I would do. But just remember, there are so many things happening in a job, in a company, that are beyond your control, beyond your understanding at that point. So just know that there are lots of things going on. So just be, I think, patient, polite, be firm in asking for what you want, but again, do that in a professional way so that you can maintain those positive relationships. So please do connect with me on LinkedIn and let's continue the conversation. And yeah, it was great being here. I have to dash off, but thank you everyone for your time. Thanks,
John. Thanks so much for being part of this conversation. Really, really helpful presentation earlier and great wisdom as well there. Super. There's some fantastic questions coming in, and we've still got lots of time, so keep coming to us with questions, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. There's an interesting one here. There's a couple here about cover letters. How important, Alexia, is a cover letter for in the job application process?
I would say that it's quite important, especially if there are questions about your CV. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a full one-pager, but it's good to have a highlight in terms of what is your either personal situation or what are your key skill sets. A lot of the cover letters I've seen from Hong Kong are like they are like a novel. I have known their whole life already by just reading it, and I would suggest avoid that, right? Like my suggestion is to highlight key skill sets that are relevant to the job that you're applying for, as well as like, again, personal situation. If I may assume that like people are holding the visa to be able to go to the UK, highlight that I won't need relocation, or there's there's no need for visa sponsorship, because that might be something from a company standpoint why they are hiring. They are going to be able to consider you for a role. If you are in need of a visa, you can always highlight the fact that your skills can definitely prove that you're better off than what is in the local market. You have to realize that you're always competing with what is in the local market, and you have to be able to highlight the things that are relevant from your profile to the job that you're applying for. So as I said, don't do a one set CV and then just use that CV every single application that you have. Make sure that you have time to put in an effort, that you are really catering to the job that you're applying for, and highlighting why you should be considered for an interview for that role.
Great, really helpful, thanks. And we spoke a bit as well about obviously we've got CVs and LinkedIn profiles and cover letters. We haven't really touched on portfolios. I don't know how, I mean, Phil, how important is that in kind of getting a job in tech, sort of GitHub type thing, or websites?
I think it can be, yeah. Certainly if you're, maybe just breaking into the industry, etc. That's a good way of showcasing your passion and your skills, contributing on other people's GitHub work, and building up stuff on there is something that I know for a fact that hiring managers do look at. So I'd say it's always good to do, and it's helping you at the same time. It's helping you learn. It's you can meet people off the back of that network. It's really a win-win, I would say.
Yeah, great. And on social communities as well, Rohan, I know we've touched on a few communities already so far. Are there any other communities that you can recommend, I guess especially from a cyber perspective, but other communities like Discord and places like that where people can network, can get advice, and find out more?
I think the best ones, in all honesty, that I have found are just groups on LinkedIn, because they just have the right kind of people within certain groups, like sort of CISOs or just kind of trends in cybersecurity, but also personally, I suppose I kind of look at it from a more business development point of view. For me, I think LinkedIn generally has been sort of the place to go to in terms of like networking. unfortunately, beyond that, there's not a lot I can add when it comes to sort of communities, because I'm not kind of that involved in more like the technical side of things, like probably like Phil or Alexia are. So that's all I can say on that matter.
Great, that's really helpful. I had an interesting question here about iOS. So I don't know if anyone's an expert on the iOS kind of market in the UK. Someone was an iOS developer in Hong Kong. Phil, Alexia, I don't know whether either of your products that Booking and Design work with respectively are built with iOS, but can either of you shed some thoughts on that?
I'll just share something that I experienced with a personal friend. So he is an iOS developer from the UK, and he went to Singapore, and I was trying to find a job for him as a headhunter in my previous life. So it was so difficult to find a role for him in Asia at that point in time, being a foreigner. But when he went back to the UK and was looking for a job, he said he had 5 offers in the span of days. So remember that tech is one of the most fluid and at the same time most engaging, let's say, domain in the market. And as long as you are within a tech space, there is a space for you in any market. Beyond the UK, there's more spaces for you in Europe. There's also like different locations. It's also the most transferable jobs because iOS is one. Of course, there is a market for that. Booking's hiring for that. You can look at our careers page to see what kind of developers that we're hiring. But there is always a space for a developer in any area of the world. And don't discourage yourself from seeing that I'm just on iOS. Look and try and see and apply so that you can see how the feedback is from your profile in the market. You'll actually be surprised like what you'll get.
So I'd say, but I know we're hiring in it, and I know that it's super popular and in demand, and it's definitely a good place to be in for sure.
Great, thanks, Phil. And we've talked a bit about kind of iOS and some of the other tech side of things. We haven't touched as much on delivery as from the tech perspective. Print, agile. Someone's asked here about how important or how well recognized is PMP as a certification for kind of project delivery here in the UK?
If I can just say, like, certifications are helpful, but we're more concerned about the projects you've delivered and the scale of the projects, especially project management. There's a difference between a project for 20 people versus a project that was running for 200 people. So it's good to highlight rather than the certification that you have. It's helpful, yes, but highlight the scope and the project, what you've done on a project and your achievements in a certain project or in your previous experience, rather than focus on all these certifications.
Brilliant, really helpful. Rohan, I know I think you may be typing answers already, but there's a couple of questions in here about security clearance. I know that for jobs, certainly in financial services, in government, there's kind of quite high hurdles for security clearance. Does that impact people who don't have that 5-year work history in the UK or 5-year living history?
Unfortunately, yes. I think especially kind of looking at my previous work history and some of the tenders that we were bidding for, especially if you are looking to work with government where there is kind of high security measures in place, you would need some sort of history in the UK to get that security clearance. But saying that, there are plenty of jobs in the private sector, I suppose, outside of high sensitive areas like banking or sort of the defense sector or the government sector that necessarily don't require that level of clearance as well. At least don't require 5 years of living in the UK or address history or work history as you may have it. So if you get rejected, I wouldn't say kind of get disheartened, because like I have said, there are plenty of other opportunities as well that probably don't require that level of security clearance. So is that what I would add?
Yeah, really helpful. And I mean, certainly speaking from someone who's running a startup, but the startup sector normally have much lower requirements to entry when it comes to security, as you can imagine. So a good place to target as well. Great, really, really helpful. Someone's asked a question about kind of Oracle and MSQL Server, like database administration, and how they would move, and come back to you, Rohan, how they would move into data analytics and cybersecurity, having worked with kind of Oracle and MSQL Server.
I think there are quite a lot of like transferable skills. Knowing for sure, we at Crossword are willing to take on people who've got an interest. So obviously, it starts with showing an interest in cybersecurity. The UK market, where it differs to the Asian market, is there's also a lot of focus on soft skills. So, you know, they really want you to, I suppose, come in and show that you will belong to the company that you want to work for, you know, that you will abide by the company culture and that you will be a good fit. But as long as you have some transferable skills, as if you worked in Oracle and IT or whatever, I think a lot of these skills can be actually learned, because you've already showcased that, you know, you've got the ability to sort of have an affiliation, so to speak, towards IT. I think those skills can then be transferred into kind of learning. And I also kind of go back to my previous point, which is there's a massive skills gap or skills shortage in the cybersecurity industry as well. So those coming from an IT background are not necessarily starting from scratch. And there is an appreciation for that their learning curve is not that steep as compared to someone who's completely sort of virgin to the cybersecurity world. So I definitely would say that look for opportunities potentially at starter level, at a sort of junior level, because a lot of the skills that you already have can be transferred into learning cybersecurity skills and data science and AI as well. You know, as long as I suppose you are a fairly numerate, you should be fine.
Brilliant, thanks, Rohan. And actually, on that topic of kind of these entry-level roles, not just with cybersecurity, but more generally, a few questions have come in here around, let's say you've got your certificate on some course, but you actually don't have any experience yet using that. And this probably, I'll come back to Phil on this one. How do you how do you kind of market yourself and your personal brand in that instance, so that you can, I guess, talk about previous experience that may not be immediately relevant, but how do you make that relevant and kind of marry that with the qualification that you just received?
So you're talking about somebody who's gone from who's upskilled into a different area. You're talking more like a junior person who's
someone maybe someone who's just moved into tech for the first time and they've gone and got some sort of qualification, but they don't have any tech experience yet to go with it.
Sort of, they've got the coding courses, but not the on-site experience. So that's where working with headhunters, for example, can be useful, because you can have that individual kind of relationship with them to help you on your search. But also there's a number of startups kind of like that bridge the gap between headhunters and job boards. So for example, there's one called hired.com. So what you can do is I found, when I worked at a previous company, I found a lot of junior developers, for example, off there who had no professional experience but had just come off a coding bootcamp course. And there was lots of candidates on there that were finding jobs. So you can sign up to that, which is free, and then they'll put you onto their system, onto the website and everything. They'll list all your qualifications, what you've done in terms of your courses, and then companies will come to you, and you can also identify companies through that are hiring roles that you're looking to get into. That's a good way to kind of grow it. And then, as I mentioned before, attending all these meetups in that space, or the conferences and all those kind of things are going to be where you meet people and meet recruiters and meet like-minded people in the industry that can help you along the way as well. So those are the key things I would say.
Superb. Thanks, Phil. Some good questions still to get through, but just a quick one I wanted to mention. Mina has put in the chat a survey, and we'd love to get your feedback on the event. We want to run future events for this community and for other communities as well. So it'd be really helpful to get your feedback. So please do follow that link and submit that after the session. Fantastic. We've had some questions coming in about remote work and working from home, and how, you know, given we're sort of coming out of the pandemic now, how commonplace, Alexia, is remote work now, and is there still a high expectation that people need to come into an office?
So for booking particularly, we're still doing a hybrid working in terms of how we operate at the moment. In terms of remote working, it is it's optional to do like we call remote starts. If a candidate is already serving the notice period and we're just waiting for them to relocate, then we allow that. But hybrid is more on optional status, because a lot of people like myself are a fan of going to the office because the office is fun. You're interacting with people. If you've been at home the last 2 years because of the pandemic, seeing your colleagues face to face is actually a relief rather than a pain. And it's more engaging, and you get a lot of things done by walking up to somebody's desk and chatting them up for 5 minutes rather than having to book a time in their calendar to meet them. So it is an optional thing at the moment. Of course, it might change in the course of time. But if you are thinking about remote working, that you are employed by a UK entity and you are in a different location, then that might cause taxation problems for a company. So you have to consider that as well.
Yeah, I just reiterate that it's you know, it's very sort of hybrid at the moment. I think across the board in tech, in certainly in London, it's kind of work the way you want to work is kind of a key message that's coming across in engineering at the moment, which is, you know, a positive to come out of this, because there are a lot of companies that where you have to be in 5 days a week, for example, and, you know, there's no flexibility to work from home. And now that's all changed and it's kind of flipped. But on the flip side, you've got obviously, you know, if you're coming over from Hong Kong, for example, you don't want to be necessarily stuck at home for that amount of time. You want to be meeting people, you want to be meeting your new colleagues and experiencing the office life and London life and stuff. So there's a really decent mix that comes with that at the moment, which is good.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, isn't it, seeing how different companies have adapted to this new way of working, and it presents a lot of opportunities, I guess, as well, for people to access jobs remotely and work in different places. Interesting question here from someone about the role of the business analyst. Is that still in demand, or is it kind of moving elsewhere? I mean, I can kind of kick off a bit of an answer because we have a lot of clients posting jobs. I think the business analyst is still quite a popular role, especially at big consultancies where they're looking for more generic skill sets. But I think I used to work at a management consultancy called Capco, and we saw in just a short time there how much the demand for some basic coding and kind of tech skills were being embedded into the business analyst role. So I think there is still, from my perspective, still a high demand from it. But I would encourage people that are looking at that kind of role to get upskilled into Python and languages like that, because they can really help you stand out as an analyst. I don't know whether any of the rest of the panel would agree or add to that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think a technical business analyst nowadays is getting, you know, a lot more traction. So it's either, as you just mentioned, doing that, upskilling in some Python, for example, or a lot of business analysts we used to have at DAZN would then move into product management and sort of move on towards that avenue. So there's a couple of different ways you can go.
Brilliant. We have a question from someone about career breaks that aren't sort of enforced. So someone taking like a sabbatical or a 6-month holiday. How does that look on a CV when you're trying to get back into the job market? And how do you talk through that with an interviewer? Alexia, I'll come back to you for that one.
If you have seen this on LinkedIn, they have a new feature that actually highlights if you take a break or a sabbatical or whatsoever for any reason. And it's saying that the world is more inclusive, that, you know, you took 6 months to travel the world and took a gap year, or you were on a maternity break because you wanted to focus on your children, or you took a break because a parent needed your help. Now the world is more inclusive. So instead of lying on the CV and not highlighting, not being able to share your experience, why you've had to leave a job and you've had to take a break, share that in their interviewer, because your interviewer will understand that, you know, you are human, you have personal circumstances, and these things are valid reasons. So the main component is don't lie about what you
Be
did.
be
Yeah.
upfront, yeah.
Be upfront about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really
I'd
good.
agree. I think if you look 3 years ago, for example, or whatever, when we were in it, it was always sort of as a big red flag, and I never understood why. But luckily, things have changed, and people have evolved and are becoming a lot more sort of flexible and kinder and kind of easy to talk to about these types of things. So definitely, as Alexia mentioned.
Very good, great. And for people who are, whether they've taken a break, whether they're coming back into the industry for different reasons, or even relocating countries, salary expectations might have changed, might be different. How does someone go about evaluating salary expectations, and what sort of other benefits do companies tend to offer in addition to salary? We can go around the whole, but yeah, we'll start with Alexia and then go around.
Okay, so one of the things that I always tell candidates who have no idea what the salary standpoint is in, let's say, the UK or even here in Europe, is to do some research. Like, look at what's the difference between tax calculations in your country versus tax calculations in the UK or in London or in Amsterdam, whichever. Look at other benefits that companies offer. So some companies, they might offer more flexibilities like commuting allowances, or sometimes for startups, which is like a big thing in the market right now, fintech, they will offer shares rather than the higher base. Also, it's there is a difference in salaries when it comes to permanent roles versus contract roles, because the contractors tend to have more flexibility on the finances and what they get as a net pay versus like when you are employed as a permanent employee. So it's good to do research. I found that Glassdoor was so helpful to set my expectations when I was moving from Asia to Europe. So I think like that is a very accurate space because it is real people filling in real information in that space. Maybe Phil?
I think I'd agree. I'd agree with that. I think in the UK, it's kind of still a little bit sad that salaries are kind of kept quiet in the market. So it is quite hard to kind of, I guess, get a complete and easy way to find this out. But Glassdoor is very sort of gives you a very good place to start. And speaking from personal experience, when I speak to candidates who ask this question, I'm always just open and honest. Like, we as a company, we will pay market rates. We're constantly looking at what the market is doing and how we can improve our salaries and keep them in line with the market. So, if you're speaking to a good recruiter and a good person, they should be able to give you that advice as well. And then in terms of don't be afraid to aim high. Salary negotiations are awkward, but doing that research and understanding that the market rate can give you the confidence in aiming for that right salary point.
Brilliant. So we've still got a bit of time and to maybe take a couple more questions. Rohan, we had a question again about cybersecurity, perhaps off the back of what you mentioned earlier about LinkedIn groups. Can someone introduce local groups in cybersecurity that they can join that to share experience that's more secure than LinkedIn? Don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Sorry, I actually don't really understand the question very well.
So they're asking, are there any cybersecurity community groups that they can join that they can share knowledge and experience in that's more secure than LinkedIn? Is LinkedIn secure? Is it not secure? Are there other groups you can recommend?
Well, I suppose depending on what you're sharing, I guess the advantage of kind of joining these groups on LinkedIn is because it's a common place for a lot of people who are focusing on a similar topic. And that's why it gives you an opportunity not only contribute, but also learn a lot. I guess depends on also what kind of material you want to share. I'm not sure why do you want it to be so secure, unless and until it's like really sensitive. I wouldn't be sharing it on social groups anyway. So I in terms of kind of local groups, my answer is I don't know, because if it was really sensitive subject matter, we will probably just have it within our firewalls within the organization and not let it really sort of go out. I guess when you are sharing something on things like social media, you just got to kind of bear it in mind. It's sort of out there, open to the world. So yeah, I don't really kind of know you is my answer, what the alternatives are.
Fair enough, and I'm sure helpful, and I'm sure there are, you know, lots on by Googling. I'm sure people can find options as well. Great. I'll do a kind of final question, and then it'd be just great to hear final thoughts from the panel, and I'll hand back to Emily. And there's a couple of questions. One's about kind of part-time work, and then one's about volunteering. So like how much demand is there for part-time work, and what are the kind of opportunities for people to do in volunteering in tech? So I'll come to Alexia on that.
So volunteering could be helpful because it gives you like hands-on experience when it comes to like whatever you're trying out. I've seen it quite useful for some candidates who wanted to try out, let's say they came out from a different career path and they started becoming a developer. They volunteer their time to do a few things, which shows that they have projects. And of course, being able to showcase that to where that project is and having access to that is good. But of course, nothing counts as like, let's say the real experience being in a workspace that allows you to access, let's say, a larger scale in terms of enterprise and scalability of work that you're doing. Because small projects are helpful for experience, but definitely having the, you know, like a full-blown experience in a bigger space would be better.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alexia. And then I think we've got a short bit of time left. I want to make sure Emily gets a chance to wrap up. Just really quick, final thoughts from the panel. It'd be great to just hear your final kind of thoughts and advice. Phil, do you want to start, and then we'll work around?
Yeah, sure. So really enjoyed it. It's some really great questions sort of coming out, and you know, hopefully there's going to be some more events like this coming up where you can kind of, you know, help out as much as possible. But you know, I think to take something away from it, just pick one thing that's kind of resonated with you, whether that be I need to create a LinkedIn profile, I need to do this, I need to do that, and just start by doing that, right? And just be curious, and that's the piece of advice I would give. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Thanks, Phil, and great to have you on. Rohan, final thoughts from you.
Just want to say thank you for kind of giving me this opportunity to be on this wonderful panel. I feel absolutely privileged to be able to contribute and help in any way I can. I just want to say I know it can be quite daunting, this whole prospect of sort of moving life first of all, and then trying to sort of set yourself up in a completely new country. And if I, or I'm sure the others as well, can help in any way alleviate some of those pain points, then we'll gladly, you know, put ourselves forward. Some of you have already connected with me on LinkedIn, and thank you very much. And yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Being in sales, I sort of really have a strong appreciation for the softer skills that are needed in terms of interviewing and job searches. So beyond cybersecurity, if I can add any value on that front as well, I'll be more than happy to have a conversation. May that be over just LinkedIn, or, you know, jumping onto a video call or anything of that nature. But thank you very much, and all the very best.
Thanks, Rohan. Great to have you with us as well. And finally, Alexia, your final thoughts.
I'm hiring. That's my final thoughts. Shameless plug, but yes, Booking is hiring in London. We do have an office there, especially for my business units in fintech. So if you're somebody who is out for a job, do look at the career web pages, not just for my company, but for companies out there, because like as internal hiring teams, we are looking at applicants. We don't ignore those CVs that come in. It must be daunting to like move to Asia, move from Asia to the UK, and there's a lot of like cultural experiences, but there's also these experiences that are wonderful, and these are the things that you have to look forward to. So as an applicant, keep your head up. Of course, like if you encounter rejection, keep trying until you get there, because like that's the only way that you'll get there.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexia. Great. Thanks so much to the panelists. I'm going to hand back to Emily. And Emily, we did have some questions that we couldn't get to. We had some questions that were specific to the kind of UKHK or the BNO visas.
Yes, no
I was going to raise that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you so much, panelists, for all of your advice and knowledge. I'm sure everyone has found it invaluable what you've shared so generously. I know I've certainly learnt new things today. And I'm sure Alexia is going to have 200 applicants for her company tomorrow from the people who've been watching today as well. So please do fill in the survey that Mina has posted in the chat on today's event. We would really love to get your feedback on this to help us improve for future sessions and to continue to support you as you settle into your new life in the UK. And we'd love to stay in touch with you as well. That's the best way that you're going to hear about future events that we have on, and you'll be able to book on them as well, whether that is to help you find a job and improve your skills to work, or whether that is other areas of settling in the UK as well. We have events coming up around educational integration for those of you with children, and helping them settle into school life, and some as I mentioned earlier, the friendship festivals, and a welcome course that will be coming to a location near you soon as well. So there's lots that we want to keep in touch with you about, so please do sign up to get our mailings as well. So fill in the feedback and sign up for our mailings, and we look forward to staying in touch with you too. Thanks everybody, have a great afternoon.